Hello and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be talking about absolute value. So you're going to want to make sure you copy down the distance definition in your notes. And then you're also going to want to make sure that you know how to find the absolute value when you're given the number in a number line and when you're giving it to you in absolute value notation with those straight up and down symbols. Both of them are fairly easy once you catch on to what you're doing. And so hopefully this lesson will go easy for you, but always make sure that you have those notes copied down so if you do get stuck, you have those to go back to and reference to. And if I ever go too fast, just pause and rewind and get caught back up. And this is an excellent lesson where you can pause at the beginning of a question, you say what you think your answer is and show work if you need to, and then watch the video and check yourself to see if we get the same answer. So I'm glad that you are joining us today, and let's go ahead and take some notes. The big thing you're going to need to understand for this lesson is the definition of absolute value. So please make sure you get this in your notes. The definition of absolute value is the distance from the point to zero. So distance is always positive or zero because zero has no sign. So that means anytime you find the absolute value of a number, your answer is always going to be positive. So if we look at some examples, we have the absolute value symbol here of straight up and down symbols telling us to find the absolute value of -4. And so if I find -4 in the number line, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 units from 0 on the number line. So the absolute value of -4 is +4. And so here we have our absolute value symbol of the straight up and down lines. We're asked to find the absolute value symbol of 5. So if I have my number line and I count how far 5 is from 0, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units from 0. So the absolute value of 5 is +5. So here your answer is always positive, never negative. So sometimes people think it just means to switch the signs. If you start with negative, go to positive. If you start positive, go with negative. That's a big no-no. That's a big misconception that students have. You're talking about distance, and distance is always positive. So absolute value, your answer is always going to be positive. So here you have a number on a number line, and it wants to know what is the absolute value of this number indicated, so -18, on the number line below. Now this number line doesn't go all the way to 0, so you could continue it if you wanted to. And if you did that, that's what it would look like. And then you can just count what is the distance -18 is from 0. And so that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 units. So that means I'm talking about distance, and my answer is always positive. It's going to be +18 units is the absolute value of -18. Now, if you weren't able to continue the number line, you could just think about the fact that when you count this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the units it is from 0 always lines up with the positive version of the number on the number line, so that the -18 is always going to be 18 units from 0. Okay, so here it's the same type of question, only it's not a whole number. And you have to look and see, okay, what is this fraction in between the 1 and the 2? So if I look, it's divided into 1, 2, 3 parts. And so that means each of these tick lines is going to be a third. So that means this is 1 1/3 and this is 1 2/3. So I'll go ahead and write that above here so I don't forget. And it wants to know what is the distance that is from 0. So what is the absolute value? Well, if you take the absolute value of 1 2/3, that means that is going to be 1 2/3 units away from 0. So your final answer is going to be 1 2/3, but they want you to use all of the math skills that you have. And when you look at this number, they don't give it your answer in fraction form. They give it to you in decimal form. So this is when you would have to take the fraction part and divide it out. So denominator goes up front, 2 goes underneath, and 3 can't divide into 2, so you add a decimal and bring that decimal up into your answer and add a 0. 3 can divide into 26 times. 6 times 3 is 18. 20 divided by 18 is 2, or minus 18 is 2. 3 can't divide into 2, so I add another 0 and bring it down. 20 divides into 3 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract 20 minus 18 and you get a 2. And so this problem is going to repeat over and over again, where you always have the 18, you always subtract and get 2, you always are putting a 6 up here. So that means that this is going to continue to be 6, 6, 6. And if you used a calculator to check that, if you took 2 divided by 3, the whole screen would be filled with 0.66666. The calculator might round at the end to a 7, but that's just because it had to end somewhere. So really, this decimal doesn't end. So we're going to want to use the repeating symbol, and the number that's repeating here is the 6, so we put a solid line above just 6. And so that means that 2/3 is the same as 0.6 repeating, and I still have my whole number of a 1. And so I've converted that to a decimal, and that makes my final answer A. And here's a positive number that they're asking us to find the absolute value of, that they give you on a number line. So they're asking us to find the absolute value of 11, positive 11. And so here you can continue the number line out if you want to, but sometimes it's hard when you're working on a computer screen. So you can just think of, okay, there's 0, and I have all those numbers in between. How many units is 11 away from 0? Well, that's going to be a distance of 11 units, and you're talking about distance, so your answer is always positive. So the absolute value of 11 is 11. And so that's going to make C my final answer, because our answer is always positive when you're talking about absolute value. So here we no longer have a number line, and they're also going to be giving us fractions and decimals, so it's a little harder to count out, but you still could if you wanted to. You could make a number line for yourself if you wanted, and if you were to do that, I would start with 0 and it's negative, so go down through negative numbers, and it doesn't have to be perfect, you're just sketching it out. And so negative 5.36 is going to be somewhere between negative 5 and negative 6. So it's going to be right about here is where negative 5.36 is. So then you want to count out how far away that is from 0. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 5.36. So that distance from 0 is 5.36. And we're talking about distance, so that an answer is always positive. So that means that my final answer here is going to be D. Or if you don't necessarily want to draw out the number line, you can remember that we're talking about the distance, and the distance is always the same as the number but positive. So that just means that here I would drop the negative symbol, and my answer would be 5.36. Here I'm asked to find the absolute value of negative 1/2. And so you can draw out the number line for that one if you want. Negative 1/2 is going to be somewhere between negative 1 and 0, right in the middle there. And so this is negative 1/2. And so how far away is that from 0? It's a half unit away from 0. And so that means that my answer here is going to be positive 1/2, because the distance from 0 is positive 1/2, making my final answer A. You don't have to draw out the number line. You could just realize that the distance from 0 is 1/2, and it's positive, so you drop the negative, and that's your answer. Here I'm asked to find the absolute value of 6/19, and so 6/19 is going to be somewhere between 0 and 1, and it's going to be about 1/3 of the way, and so it's going to be about right here. And so its distance from 0 is going to be 6/19 of a unit. And so my answer here is going to be positive 6/19, which is C. Now, if you didn't want to draw the number line, which the more you do these, the less often you're probably going to have to draw that number line, is you could just realize that 6/19 is 6/19 away from 0, and it's just going to stay positive because it's a distance. And our last problem here is you're just taking the absolute value of a whole number. So you could draw out the number line if you wanted to and count over, and it would be a little easier because it's a whole number. However, we've done a few of these now, so 13 is going to be positive 13 units away from 0. So that means the absolute value of 13 is positive 13. However, they don't list positive 13 as an answer. So you're going to have to go through these and see which one of these is also equivalent to positive 13. So here, negative 13, there's nothing to work out there. There's no problem. It's just an answer. So it can't be A. Now B, it's the absolute value of negative 13. So the absolute value of negative 13, that negative 13 is also 13 units away from 0. So that means that the distance here is going to be positive 13. And so B also equals 13. So that means B is probably going to be my answer, but let's go ahead and check the rest of these. Now here, inside the absolute value symbol is a positive 13. Positive 13, the absolute value of positive 13 is 13. And then because the negative symbol is out front, it just carries out front also. So that C equals negative 13. So it's not C because we want positive 13. And then D has negatives in both places. So the absolute value of negative 13 is going to be positive 13. But then you have that other negative that's out front that wasn't included in the distance. So it just carries through. And so D is also negative 13. So it's not going to be D. So that's why B is your final answer. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something new.